Dallas Turner immediately blew up joint practices with the Baltimore Ravens, and it only got better from there.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Join all the action at FanDuel.com to play daily dingers and make your free pick on who's hitting a homer this MLB season. I am coming to you from parts unknown to talk about Vikings-Ravens joint practices. They kicked up. It's always a really big moment in camp when you get these joint practices. These are kind of a big inflection point. And a lot of times these serve as the big dress rehearsal for the starters. You're not going to see a lot of the ones. Kevin O'Connell even confirmed Kyler Murray's done. So you're not going to see a lot of the ones anymore throughout the preseason. And there is a debate about this. Maybe I'll get into it in a little bit about like whether or not to play your players in the preseason and risking injury or not or whatever. But the key thing about it that everybody always forgets when you're talking about how much somebody like Murray played in the preseason is that these joint practices are often going to be more competitive reps because they're up against the Ravens starters as well. And you can't control in a preseason game if the other guys are going to come in and just like play their twos all day, and then those reps might not be as valuable as they would be against the Ravens one. You're going, against Marlon Humphrey and Kyle Hamilton and all those other guys on Baltimore, and you're going to be able to sneak in a lot more reps without the rigmarole of a preseason game. In a preseason game, a lot of what you will see the starters do is like one drive or one quarter, right? Which ultimately, in one quarter, what's a quarter stat line for a quarterback, right? You go, 4 of 6, and it's like you ended up getting 6 dropbacks, right? 4 of 6 for 65 yards, and you feel like that's pretty good. And that's going to be, that's 6 reps. In joint practices, you can rattle off 80. Line it up, run it again. Line it up, run it again. Line it up, run it again. They're safer because there's no tackling. Your quarterbacks are in non-contact jerseys, so you can sort of limit the injury aspect of it while still getting that tune-up you hope you get from the preseason. So that's why they're doing that. And the way that the Vikings started joint practices on Wednesday, there will be another session today, Thursday, as you see this, was absolutely monstrous. So first couple of plays, Dallas Turner blows a couple of them up. TFL and a sack. And it just keeps going from there. You had a Levi Drake Rodriguez sack. You had an Elijah Williams sack. The linebackers all made plays. The second teamers made plays. There's some pretty cool reps that I saw come out of Chuck Demings in one-on-ones that are really interesting and maybe worth breaking down the way that he played, where he was very, I think it was Jacoby Lane he was up against. And the Ravens are really excited about Jacoby Lane, which is probably why there were cameras on that. But Chuck Demings was very disrespectful in the way that he played. And I mean that as a compliment. As a corner, the more respect you give the guy in front of you, the more you're going to react to the stuff that they're throwing at you in the release or whatever, like whatever head fake and whatever, like juke and jive. The more respect you give them is kind of a way of saying how much you're reacting to that stuff. And Demings was not reacting to that stuff at all. I prefer this in a cornerback. I like guys who underreact versus overreact. Andrew Booth was an overreactor. We don't want that. And it turned into one where he got a little grabby and they both end up going down. That's probably going to be a penalty in a game. And then another one that was a go route over his head that Lane caught that got a lot of oohs and ahs, where he was in the kind of back pocket of Jacoby Lane. So it was kind of like, half a step ahead, and so there was just enough to drop that in the bucket, which is actually a reasonable spot to be at lower levels. Like a lot of young DBs will be there because at lower levels, quarterbacks can't make that. So that's good enough, right? You give them, if you drop it in the bucket, perfect, beautiful raindrop, yeah, it's going to be a catch, but anything else is going to be incomplete, and you'll take that when you're in college or when you're at Stephen F. Austin. Because those quarterbacks just aren't going to be able to hit that ball often enough. That's going to be a good place to be. But you're in the NFL now, Cat. Now it's Lamar Jackson over there. You're going to be playing against Jordan Love and Jared Goff and Caleb Williams and guys that can hit that ball. So I think there's a bit of a welcome to the NFL in that that I find to be like, that's kind of exactly what this is for. To go up against, I mean, Lamar Jackson's best quarterback that has probably walked on this field ever. I'm not being crazy. Who else is even, I mean, unless you want to have Joe Burrow opinions about it, which I won't get into, that probably has ever graced TCO Performance Center, right? And, unless you want to throw Sam Darnold in that, which would be a little bit of recency bias. So that's going to be some of the best competition, most certainly the best quarterback Chuck Demings has ever played against. And I don't know if Lamar threw that ball, because the quarterbacks will cycle through as well. Could have even been, no, it would have been a Ravens quarterback. But point being, that's exactly the kind of thing you want him to be learning in practice. But I do really appreciate that the way we need to go is, hey, you're being a little too aggressive about this. You have to be a little more careful than trying to coax someone who's being too careful and too reactive into having to, suddenly conjure that confidence out of nowhere. Much easier to go the other direction, at least in my opinion. So in a weird way, I'm still, that doesn't dissuade me from being really excited about Chuck Demings. But really, it's the front seven. The Vikings front seven is crazy. And Dallas Turner's breakout is this very well advertised thing. I've talked about it a ton on this show. Other people have said this is supposed to be the year. Jonathan Grenard even mentioned it on his way out when he was on the way to the Eagles. He was like, hey, watch out for 15, by the way. Like, that's been a big thing. And so for him to walk onto the field against the Ravens and just immediately make his presence felt is really, really exciting. It's another guy I don't think we're going to see strap him up again until week one, until games actually count. So this is kind of what we're going to have to go with. And, they'll continue to do practice and just do maintenance and stuff. But this is the final dress rehearsal. This is taking the place of what in the old days would have been like the third preseason game where the starters play a whole half. That's basically what you're getting right now. And so for Dallas Turner to be like ready to rock and immediately explosive, really, really exciting. And in fact, from at least what we could see coming out of this joint practice, things were very exciting for the Vikings. There are a couple things here and there. I'm sure you've seen a couple of lowlights, depends on who's posting what, right? And what social media you're on. But it sounds to me like the Vikings super, super cleanly won the day. That rules. The Ravens are a very good team, and to kind of prove that you can go toe-to-toe with them, starter to starter, one-to-one, is going to mean more to me than our preseason game against them where it's all about the depth, right? That's going to be more about determining depth chart spots and, who's making the roster and all that stuff. But for guys like Turner, Eric Wilson, Levi Drake Rodriguez, for the young guys, Golday to make plays, Jay Ward had a big play. Another career we are watching with great interest. Something might be happening with Jay Ward as a bona fide starter on this team, kind of taking over the Metellus role as Metellus kind of rotates back to more deep safety stuff to replace Harrison Smith. Something might be going on there in a real fun way with Jay Ward. I liked what he did for whatever he was in the preseason game, and now he's making plays again in the joint practices. But to me, my real takeaway from this whole camp process and preseason as well, what we've saw of them in the preseason, is that in the Vikings front seven, so not including Jay Ward, but, D-line linebackers, they seem pretty much too deep at every position in a really comfortable way. Like, it just seems like the front seven is just beast and actually also has the depth to hopefully withstand an injury here or there. They're not going to be top heavy. Like, if we get to a point where Levi Drake Rodriguez is starting either because, the rookies aren't ready or because somebody gets hurt or whatever, and he ends up just being an every down starter, he might just be up to that task. That might just be fine. And that's like one of the worst cases you can think of. If you need more Ivan Pace, you need more Jake Golday, you need one of these rookies to step up, that's awesome. The only one edge depth is the one we've been talking about. And we'll figure out kind of what happens there. Chaz Chambliss has been with the twos on that one, and as a special teamer, I would say that he's got a really, really good inside track to the 53-man roster, but that might be a guy that if he could get fast and do something, like maybe That'll work. I've never really thought he was built like an NFL edge rusher, but a year later, you put on some bulk. I mean, look at Dallas Turner again. Visibly larger, just a visibly bigger body, and is going to be able to hold his ground a little bit more, and it looks like the quickness and explosiveness did not go away with that extra bulk. That's huge. So I'm stoked as heck on these front seven guys. And on the other side of the ball, which was a little harder for everybody to see because the Vikings offense was on the far field, we got even more good news. That will be next on Locked On Vikings. This episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, FanDuel is doing its Daily Dingers promo. All you got to do is log on to FanDuel, and every single day, you get a chance to guess who's going to hit a homer. So if you know who is going yard today, just make your free pick for who you think will hit a home run in their game. And if you're right, you get a profit boost to use on your next bet for a chance at extra winnings. Daily Dingers is another fun way to stay engaged with games every day, whether it's just your team or the league as a whole. So if you just wanted to, if you did Fernando Tatis Jr., who went yard a couple times on Tuesday night, you would have gotten your profit boost there. Or you could just like pick Cody Clemens every day, pick Shohei Ohtani every day, pick whoever is going to be the guy, and just run it back. And every time they go yard, you are going to get a profit boost. However it is, play your game today. Join all the action at FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com to play Daily Dingers and make your free pick on who is hitting a homer. Play ball and swing for the fences on FanDuel, an official partner of the MLB. Moving on here with the Locked On Vikings podcast. Thank you so much for hanging out every single day on Locked On Vikings. The offense in these joint practices also seemed to have a pretty nice day, although it kind of depends on who you ask. Apparently, Justin Jefferson had a couple of miscues. He fell down on a play and it almost turned into a Kyler Murray interception to Marlon Humphrey. However, the practice really kind of culminated in this 2-minute drill at the very end. Offense down 5 with like a minute 30 to go. And both the first and second team Vikings offenses ended up scoring the touchdown they needed to. And I think they both took 3 plays to do it. Kyler Murray comes in and caps it off with a big, long, I want to say post-touchdown to Justin Jefferson, gritty, everybody going crazy. And then J.J. McCarthy and the twos come out and do the same thing. And McCarthy hits a big gain to Myles Price, and then that turns into a touchdown the other way. You have McCarthy and Kyler Murray high-fiving each other afterwards as they both managed to score on this 2-minute drill. Absolutely could not have asked for that to go any better for the first day of joint practices. And you love to see that for McCarthy, too, who struggled so much in that Giants game. I just did the show yesterday about it. And had so many like super alarming and concerning things to just kind of like waltz out there. Hey, look, situational football, go make the thing happen. Remind yourself, dude, you can play quarterback. You were in D1, you were in the Big Ten, you won a championship. Like you can do this. Remember, you're one of the people who is allowed to do this for an NFL team. Like you're still in the upper echelon, and let's put you against a real defense. It's Baltimore, and put you in a rough situation, down 5, needing touchdown. To win the game and go prove that you can do it, by the way, throwing all the twos. And yeah, it's against the Ravens twos, but I think rebuilding that confidence is going to be a part of, if we have any world where we want to salvage something out of this J.J. McCarthy experiment that we have sitting in our boiler room, rebuilding that confidence after losing a competition to Kyler Murray and then immediately going out and proving why you lost the competition to Kyler Murray in the first time we see you in televised football. Rebuilding that confidence is going to be a huge part of that, and giving him the time he needs to figure out how to operate this offense. If you can't do it and you can't do it, it's just too complicated, or the timings aren't right and you just aren't consistent enough with all of this, a year in the slow cooker maybe would help do that. But I think a really important thing to go into it, and if this continues today, that'd be great in the second joint practice, is to walk into that with your head held high and to finish the preseason on a high note, so that that's the taste in your mouth as you go into the season and kind of transition into backup quarterback mode, which is going to be the job, right? Now you're it's not just you develop. Now you're helping him with you're helping Kyler with game plans, and you're in the classroom, and you're a sounding board, and you're, kind of doing like assistant coaching work is what backup quarterbacks do a lot. This is part of why the Vikings really like having Carson Wentz in the building, because apparently he's been really helpful with that stuff, by the way. So the whole room contributes to that. Brosmer was helpful with it last year as well. And so you're part of the brain trust now, right? And you have to transition to that. It doesn't give you as much time to focus, but with the pressure off of you, and you get to be the peanut gallery a little bit and say you should have done this, or here's what we should do, and you get to sit in the film room and kind of evaluate somebody else's play in this system without it reflecting directly on you, and maybe that lets you kind of grow in the system and get used to the language a little bit more and just be a little bit more immersed in things and help out in a way that apparently didn't happen in his rookie season because of that injury rehab. And O'Connell even said, this is something they tried to squeeze out of 2024 and they just couldn't get it. But maybe there can be something. I don't know. Maybe I'm being hopelessly optimistic here. Maybe he'll be on another team by this time next month. But I won't. I'll be the last person to predict that, and I'm perfectly happy avoiding any predictions on that sort until it actually happens, and we'll cross that bridge if we come to it. But anyways, I do want to talk a little bit more about Myles Price in a minute and whether or not he's like the real deal, but because he had that great preseason game, and I managed to take a bit of a closer look at that. But again, another big moment for Myles Price with the twos. And him and Ty Felton are one of the stories of camp, of pushing that wide receiver 3 role. I don't think they're going to take it from Juwan Jennings. Doesn't look like that momentum is here quite yet. But they're playing well enough to at least raise an eyebrow. And I wanted to see if that whole thing was real. So we'll talk about that in just a second. First, a couple of things that I want to update you on since last we talked live, since last I did something timely. Jamal Adams, a torn quadricep tendon. It's a tendon like right above your knee, and he tore it on his left leg in, I think, 2022, and his right one just went. And that's the season-ending knee injury that he got. Kevin O'Connell confirmed that. If you hadn't seen it, I'm a couple days late to that news, but that's where that is. They signed another kind of random center that's in the bottom tier that actually doesn't surprise me a ton. So one of the preseason depth chart things that may have gone a little overlooked is that 7th round rookie, Gavin Gerhardt, didn't get in until after the 3rd team center. He was a 4th team center, and the 3rd team center was a guy named Vershawn Lee, who's been a practice squad type guy with the Vikings for a while, who plays guard. So a guard out of position is currently playing over Gavin Gerhardt at center, and then they just brought in another interior lineman to add to that. So Gerhardt's chances of being a successful 7th round pick and making the team are looking a little bit rough. If he ends up getting poached or whatever, that would be one thing. But sometimes with those guys, they end up on the practice squad for a year. And then, wasn't it Metellus? Didn't that happen with Josh Metellus? He didn't make the team initially. And I mean, Adam Thielen most famously, right? But, those late round picks, sometimes they need a year. Or maybe I'm thinking of Blake Brandel, who Blake Brandel definitely didn't make the team in his first year. And then just needed that year, and then he made the team the second year, and he gets more chances, right? That practice squad thing. So maybe Gavin Gerhardt is going on that deal. But they did that. They moved Jamal Adams to IR, and that whole thing is now done. But if I can quickly just wax a little bit more poetic on the linebackers, missing Jamal Adams, I mean, you just transport the strategy back to whatever they were thinking about for most of the summer anyways, right? Like, they didn't have Jamal Adams in their sights. I don't think they had Jamal Adams as like part of the plan in, April when they were drafting or anything like that. I think that was an opportunity that happened, and they go, we can do some interesting things here. Oh, well, okay, never mind. Then you go back to like default state, which is, if I can just silver lining it, right, is going to be a little better than losing some core piece you were building the whole thing around for the whole offseason, and now you're in scramble mode. You're losing what was functionally gravy. And the Vikings have done a great job to make it clear that like Jamal Adams is still going to be part of this organization. He's going to be around. He's going to be part of the team. He's going to be included in everything. They're not just going to let him kind of go off and do his own thing now that he got hurt, which is not universal in the NFL. And Kevin O'Connell specifically seems to make a point of doing that. But without Jamal Adams, who did play linebacker, he didn't play like deep safety or anything like that, or nickel corner. It was very similar to like, he was basically the second team Jay Ward, kind of. Well, and Jay Ward then like played deep a little bit with the twos. But that's the linebacker room. And so without him in there, I still feel like there's like a bunch of pressure on this roster, on this group, which is crazy. Like a bunch of roster pressure, I mean. Like too many guys that we want to roster, which is a great problem to have. With Eric Wilson and Blake Cashman and Ivan Pace and Jake Golday all excelling. They are all playing a level, they all, at least in the preseason game, all four of those guys, played a level of football that makes you either excited about their prospects if they're a starter or impossible to cut if they're not. The demanding, you may not cut me. I'm playing too well to justify that. And then you have guys like Jacob Roberts and Bengali Kamara that have their moments too in the second half of that game. So that linebacker group's going to be really interesting to watch how it unfolds and just how many of these guys the Vikings are going to keep. They might have an embarrassment of riches there. And that's a good thing to have. That's a good problem to have, that you might end up cutting a player that's actually pretty good. That might go make a 53-man roster, someone else, and get claimed on waivers that you just didn't have room for. Happens sometimes. Let me circle back next to Myles Price and how good I thought he was in the Giants preseason game, plus what's happened. He's made a couple plays in joints. He ended the practice with a big one in that 2-minute drill from JJ McCarthy. But is it real? Or is he just dunking twos? Has he taken that step forward? His game is a lot easier for me to define now. And that's going to make for a very interesting developmental arc. We'll get into it next on Locked On Vikings.
What's going on, everybody? My name is Ross Jackson, host of the Locked On at Saints podcast, and today's Locked On episode is brought to you by our friends at Basque and Lather. I've been using Basque and Lather's all-natural, 100% organic hair care products for my beard for a couple of years now, and it's been a lifesaver because I used to have some bad beard care habits. I'm talking over-the-counter shampoo and the beard type stuff that created this brittle, scratchy, and uncomfortable beard that I just had to wear around all the time. But now the game done changed. Thanks to Basque and Lather, I got their beard care starter kit, which gave me shampoo, conditioner, oil balm, and their hair growth stimulator formula as well. And now my beard is full. It's soft but strong, and the confidence is on 10, and it's all thanks to Basque and Lather. Explore viral bestsellers and products of healthier hair of all types from Basque and Lather. Go to baskeandlatherco.com and use the promo code LOCKEDON for 20% off. That's 20% off at baskeandlatherco.com. Code Locked On.
Moving on here with the Locked On Vikings podcast. Let's get into this Myles Price thing. Myles Price, an undrafted rookie last year, who gets the punt return job and makes the team by virtue of Rondale Moore getting hurt. Rest his soul. Already you are in an unlikely place. And Myles Price as a returner last year was kind of the least of their problems on that unit. That unit was a disaster. So much so that, we talk about firing Matt Daniels over it, despite the rest of those operations not being that bad at all, especially including the field goal unit, and you had Ty Felton doing fun things. But those kick returns were so bad, was like dead last in the league. And if I recall, by a decent margin, that we were like, is this special teams coordinator the right guy, right? And you had guys that couldn't block, and you had these kind of weirdly over-engineered kick returns. And Myles Price was actually making the best of this and seems to be a shoo-in for that job going into camp. However, Damon Claiborne has now entered the mix, and that returner battle is actually kind of interesting. And because both of those guys are playing well from scrimmage, neither of them seem to have their roster spot really pinned to that returner job anymore, which is pretty cool. But Myles Price has gotten a lot of hype. A lot of people talking about Ty Felton and Myles Price as these receivers, these young receivers that might be stepping up and becoming something and making these KJ Osborne-esque leaps into the starting roster. Here's the thing. Myles Price is a smaller receiver, and so he suffers from the same challenges that you get with somebody like Jordan Addison, who is the best on the team at overcoming this. Or if you want to go to the other side with the joint practices, Zay Flowers, very much this kind of guy, a small receiver that has to kind of live a different way. And what I see with Myles Price is a lot of the time he ends up trying to fight through that contact. And it actually compares really interestingly to Ty Felton, who is trying to go around it. Those are the two ways, right? You can either fight through it and try to just kind of muscle up, but if you don't have the muscle, you're going to get knocked off your rhythm really bad. So there's a play from J.J. McCarthy's day that has sparked a lot of debate. I was debating Arif in texts about it because we got kind of different interpretations. It was a catch to Myles Price on a deep curl that there was like 2 holding penalties on. Do you remember that play from the preseason game? And my argument is that Myles Price kind of gets jacked up. That he's fighting through the contact, but he not only gets slowed down, he gets knocked pretty far off of his track and has to restack onto that track. He gets there, he turns it around, but it forces J.J. McCarthy to buy time. And Arif's point is that the drop back was too fast anyways, so he had to sit back there for longer, which makes life harder on the O-line, and then, that which is a different point than what I'm talking about right now. And so he kind of says, well, that was still kind of mistimed and it was JJ's fault. I say is a little bit more Myles Price's fault, and McCarthy had to buy time, and I think he hitched 1 too many times, but it wasn't 7 too many hitches, it was 1. And it was a completion at the end of the day, and it was penalty on the defense anyways. So like it's pretty hard to chalk that up to a bad rep. But for Myles Price, I think that rep is actually really indicative of the rest of his day. That kind of thing happened to him a lot throughout the day, where he would get jacked up off the release, he would have to fight through, and it would slow him down, but he wouldn't go as far off of his track as Ty Felton. Ty Felton would go way outside of his track and try to stack that thing back up. And I think the reason he wasn't as productive as we would have hoped based on what we've been hearing out of camp is because he hasn't quite gotten to the place where he can do that around thing and get back to where he's supposed to be and when he's supposed to be there. If you think about like the fundamental building blocks of the Kevin O'Connell offense, you have to get to a certain point and then you have to go a certain direction, and it all has to sync up with the quarterback's footwork, right? They think of their timings as 3 steps or 5 steps or 5 and a hitch or whatever. And whenever your route is supposed to break, well, it better be where the quarterback is expecting it, because that quarterback's going to throw with anticipation if we like him to, right? If we like him. And you can see that happen with a Kyler Murray rep, the 3rd and 7 to Jordan Addison that was challenged and stood, was an anticipation throw just like that. Addison broke where exactly he was supposed to be, and he showed up where the ball was supposed to be, and Kyler Murray put it low away from the receiver, and they were able to link it up. But if you throw with anticipation and the receiver doesn't show up, you look like an idiot. You look like you missed really bad, right? So McCarthy was moving off of Felton a lot in that game because he wasn't showing up to the place he needed to be. And so he had to move on. Murray did that as well on the 3rd and 4 that he couldn't link up to Aaron Jones. Had to move on from Ty Felton because I think Felton was late to where he needed to be. So, all right, 3's not there, move on, right? Either way, these guys need to find a way to get by the physical coverage. But once you get there, what I love about Price's game, and I see this in Felton's too, but I think I like it better on Price's, is how he's attacking is a lot more motivated. And you can see the Justin Jefferson influence here. You could even take away, if you want a nice like bumper sticker takeaway from this episode, Justin Jefferson's presence is helping these young guys, and he's rubbing off on them in a very, very good way. Not to mention Keenan McCardell. Of course, I think that goes without saying. He gets a lot of credit for young player development in his room. But I really do think some of the stuff that Jefferson loves to do, for example, when he's running a longer route, he will a lot of times stem his route directly at the safety or whoever is going to cover him. And you can kind of tell by alignment, unless they're doing some crazy disguise, I know I'm going to be running a route over there That's the guy there. He's probably whether it's 2 or 3 or 4 or cover, whatever, I'm probably going to be with that guy in some way, with some leverage. So he will stem his route directly at that guy, which makes a really challenging decision point for that defensive back on how he wants to set up the rest of his coverage. I won't go into like super gory details because I don't want to bore you with little tiny bits, but basically, you know, whether I'm going to be inside or outside, or should I get more depth or less depth, or should I let him eat up a little bit more? When 18's blazing at you, it's going to put a lot of pressure on you. And wherever he's going to break, he's essentially taking away any leverage at all. You know, if I started a little bit inside you, but by the time you stemmed your route, you were in front of me, just straight up in my face, well, now you could break left, break right, break back toward the ball, keep going deep, you could go corner, post, and I don't have a lot of hint for how to approach that, and I don't really have leverage anymore. You kind of took away my leverage by stemming right at me. So do I kind of try to keep my leverage, and then you're going to just break away from me anyways, and you just widen me out exactly where you want me? It's like it becomes this really difficult guessing game of chicken for defensive backs, and Myles Price is starting to do that. There's a play, I think it was on the same play as the Jayshon Jones holding penalty that McCarthy threw, that Jayshon Jones got like held and tripped up and the ball went incomplete, but it was penalty defense. I think it was on that one where Myles Price attacked to the opposite shoulder of the safety. So what I mean by that is the safety had lined up outside of Myles Price, closer to the sideline. And Price attacked that outside shoulder, essentially crossing that safety's face. And that's really difficult. The safety backpedals a little bit because Price is fast and ends up completely unable to contest what is an outbreaking route. And think about the challenge there. Myles Price has an outbreaking route on that one. I think it was like a deep corner, deep, like a flag, you'd call it. And the defensive back is already to the outside of him and in the proper leverage. So with his route stem, he has to cross that leverage, and then suddenly he's free and clear to get away. Very Justin Jefferson-esque. I really loved that play. He didn't get the ball. Nobody's even going to talk about it. But I really liked that play. I thought that was a cool play for Myles Price. Not to mention the stuff he did with Carson Wentz wrestling that one away. That first pass from Carson Wentz, and then the one-handed touchdown speaks for itself. But I wanted to do this Myles Price thing without talking about those plays, because I think the ones that teach you the most are the other routes where he doesn't get the ball, where you see what he was planning. What's my plan to get open, right? Have a plan. What am I going to do? Understanding that I think I know who's going to cover me, and whether they're inside of me, outside of me, 10 yards off of me, 15 yards off of me, 5 yards off of me, are they in press? And understanding all those things and then saying, okay, how am I going to counter that? What's my plan for that? Those wheels are turning, and then getting stronger and better against that like physical coverage is another thing that can come with time. But if those wheels are turning, we're already very much on the way where these guys are perfectly satisfactory to be wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5. And then it's just a matter of developing while you do whatever you're going to do on special teams anyways and still contribute to the team. A lot of exciting stuff going on today. It's a good time for those purple colored glasses, because hope springs eternal every summer, and that's the way it is. I will see you all tomorrow, and as always, Skol.